I'm a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with stage 3C breast cancer in my 30s, in my early 30s. And it was pretty brutal. Like, I lost my breasts and my ovaries and had chemo and radiation. And despite all of that difficult time, the harder part was during the aftermath of it, like trying to figure out how to get back into life in a way that was authentic.
Welcome to Voices of Esalen. I'm Sam Stern. My guest today is Ann Hamilton, founder of the Survivorship Collective, an organization created by and for cancer survivors, seeking healing, meaning, and agency through legal psychedelic journeying. After surviving breast cancer in her 30s, Ann, a successful feature film director, found herself overcome with uncertainty. Soon after she celebrated her 5-year cancerversary, she had a life-changing experience with psilocybin, one that helped her metabolize grief and fear in a way traditional medicine never could. Psilocybin helped Ann make sense of the liminal spaces that illness carves out in one's life. In the wake of Oregon's groundbreaking law legalizing regulated psilocybin therapy, she saw an opportunity to create a safe, legal, community-driven path for cancer survivors to access sacred and transformational experiences. In this conversation, we explore the roots of the collective, Ann's vision for psychedelic healing in the cancer community, and the deeper questions that arise when we begin to see illness and even death as part of the spiritual path.
Treatment started in winter of 2018. And then I had a double mastectomy in April of that year. I had radiation that summer. Radiation put me into almost like sepsis because I had this is just gross stuff, but this is what happens. My skin fell off my body. And so I was in the hospital with 104-degree temperature for a good week. And it was just it took a while. And then I had reconstruction. There were problems with that. So I was in and out of treatment until probably 2020. All this stuff happened to my body, right? And it changed the way I think about life because it might be shorter for me. It's definitely going to be a little bit harder and it's going to be more expensive. My career's never going to be the same, right? There's all these sort of identity shifts that are really difficult to manage. But also, and I think this is a deeper issue, it's not just about identity, it's actually about something more spiritual than that, which I have a lot of trouble with because I've been an atheist since I was 15 and I don't like talking about spirituality. It makes me really uncomfortable. But I do think there's something happening when you go through something that profound where you kind of have to bump up against what reality is, right? And we kind of live in this wonderful, magical bubble of, even though there's a lot of things happening that are going terribly wrong in the world right now, let's just acknowledge that. We still live in a world where we can kind of expect to live to be 70 or 80, right? We can kind of expect to have decent healthcare if we're lucky, or if we're born in a certain place. But then something happens and you're like, oh, actually, reality isn't that at all. And it's not just about safety, it's about consciousness. What is it to die? And if you I think it's really great to go through life and not really contemplate those things heavily. I think people can be very happy doing that. But if you're forced to do that because you might die young, and certainly your friends are dying young, people that you love, and it could have been you, then you really have to think about it. And that's hard because when you go back out into the world where everybody else is young and having babies and paying off their mortgages and stuff. And you're like, but I just really want to talk about existence and mortality and consciousness, but nobody can really meet you there at the table. That's a bit lonely. And that was really hard. It was impossible. I'm going to say that. It was just impossible to get back into the world in an authentic way for a very long time.
From all you know about cancer survivors now, is that an experience that many folks share?
I think they share it, but I don't think they're given the language to express it in that way because we're given antidepressants, they'll just throw all the antidepressants at you and you're like, thanks, I'm not feeling anything anymore. That's nice. They're not oh, this is going to rock your world in ways that are really profound and here are some tools that might be helpful, right? I mean, they're like, qigong's nice, and it is nice, and it's so helpful, by the way, to get back into your body that way, and meditation's great too, and maybe yoga. But what you're that sort of rocking the core of existence part, nobody at a hospital, except for maybe some really good chaplains, are going to even touch on that. And so people are just wandering in the world. They're like, I'm deeply disassociated and I don't know why. And yes, it's body stuff. It's PTSD from amputations, which I think cancer's a lot like going to war in a lot of different ways. And it's also deeply spiritual too, because you have to think about dying because it could happen, like it could come back, right? Like I'm in a category where no matter what I do, I'm at the highest sort of quadrant of recurrence. And I know that, and I'll always be there. But like, how do you live a really authentic, bold life knowing that? Nobody gives you the tools to do that. Nobody. I had a very good experience, not at Esalen, but a very good experience with psilocybin when I was going through this sort of dark night of the soul. And I had tried everything else, but psilocybin, because I had a friend who knew somebody who was trustworthy, I had a really good experience with it. And it really helped me over the course of 6 hours unlock a lot of the problems I was having with authenticity in the world. And that happened sort of quietly, right? It was during the pandemic. I'm an attorney. So I also like, I was like, I don't want to talk to people about doing this. It seems kind of not my world. It's okay to do in other countries sort of, but like, it was just kind of it was a little not my brand, let's say. It's like a mild way of putting it. And I don't advocate doing anything illegal or underground. I just think it's too risky. But again, you can travel to places and it's legal to do in other countries, in some other countries. But so that happened, right? And then a couple of years later, I was at Esalen on one of your wonderful retreats, and I met a woman there who also had cancer, but it had come back. There was a recurrence. And we were talking about dealing with uncertainty and dealing with death. And she was like, I want to have access to this. I want to tell people about this. How do I do it safely? Where can I go? And I was like, well, I can't recommend that you travel to another country. Like you're in the middle of chemo or whatever it is. Like, and I also don't recommend doing it underground in the US because who knows what's going to happen. And it's extremely expensive. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice? And actually, my first thought was there must be an organization that helps people like us, like her. There must be an organization because the whole reason there's been this psychedelic renaissance is because of cancer patients. So there must be a nonprofit that serves our needs and thinks about all the different complexities of trauma around cancer and also connects people to safe, legal psilocybin because Oregon had just opened up its doors and now it's Colorado and New Mexico will be down the road soon. But it turns out there was nothing. There was no nonprofit. There were some clinical trials happening, but if you're not in the right town for a clinical trial, if you're not near Johns Hopkins or near one of the sites, or if you're not in palliative care, so there's very strict, rules about who can be in different clinical trials, then you're kind of out of luck. I reached out to a couple of friends in the survivor community and we formed together as survivors, a nonprofit that the whole goal is to create harm reduction and structured experiences around the bubble that makes it safer for cancer survivors to access this.
Would you just unpack something for me? You mentioned that the whole reason that the psychedelic renaissance happened was because of cancer patients. Can you speak to that?
Psychedelics were not accessible legally for years and years. Like in the 1960s, there was something called the Spring Grove Clinic that Bill Richards ran, and it was primarily for cancer patients dealing with death, like people who were close to dying, and they were given psilocybin. It was very helpful. But then that was all shut down during the war on drugs. Psilocybin was wrapped in with all these other drugs that are actually harmful and addiction forming. But it was sort of grouped in with these other things, even though there were amazing benefits for people who were dealing with life-threatening illness. And then in the early 2000s, Bob Jesse and Bill Richards and Roland Griffiths put together a study that was around people dealing with life-threatening illness. I think it was only cancer, actually. And it might have been mostly stage 4. I'd have to look back at the study. But it was a study about, can this be helpful for people dealing with death anxiety? Can one high dose of psilocybin be helpful for people dealing with death anxiety? And the answer was yes. And I don't want to, I think Bob would be, all of them would be upset if I talked to you about this more without looking at the actual paper. But that was the upshot. That was the thing. Like, this helps people dealing with death anxiety. And those were cancer patients. So these men and women who have limited time went in and did this clinical trial. They donated their very valuable, very limited time to helping science. And it turns out just one dose of psilocybin helped people dealing with cancer.
Can you describe what a safe, science-based psychedelic therapy looks like for someone in your program?
So in our program, we have a model that is based around a group experience. And obviously not everybody wants to do that. So if somebody's not interested in a group, we could certainly talk to them about that. But our model is a group model for many reasons. One is that it creates a container where there's support that's ongoing, right? So people meet each other, they continue that connection long after the ceremony and the structured content of our retreats are done. So that's really important, and that's different than a clinical trial. But the story of every retreat begins with people saying that they're interested. We do a quick interview just to kind of see where they're at and to sort of gauge chemistry about like, because it's a group, right? So we want to see like maybe this is a better group for you or whatever it happens to be. We have them meet with a medical professional who knows a lot about psilocybin and cancer. So that's a big deal too. We that's mandatory. Every person meets with a doctor, like an actual MD, who can advise about all sorts of things like contraindications. We have one person at our most recent retreat who's stage 4 in chemotherapy. So working around that and making sure that was safe was a big deal. And obviously, if you're on different kinds of medications like antidepressants, they might have a blunting effect. So understanding that is really important. So medical professional, I can go on and on about each stage, but there's a medical professional meeting. Once that's cleared, once we have a safety plan, if one is necessary, and we know that there's a green flag, then we start preparation. So a lot of studies show that with more preparation and in a group setting and also individual preparation, the outcomes are much better in terms of people having a good experience with the medicine. So we have 2 to 3 individual sessions with a coach who's been trained they're trained coaches who have gone through some kind of like either CIIS training, or there's a lot of different schools like Berkeley, Naropa. And then there's also group meetings that happen in preparation too, that are an hour and a half to 2 hours, where everybody meets everybody else on Zoom. We answer questions. We talk about all sorts of things involving what people are dealing with. And everybody's coming in with a similar background in that they've been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, cancer, but people are at different stages and different, aspects and different problems. So everybody gets to know everybody else. Mm-hmm. And then we have the actual retreat, which is 4 to 5 days, depending on how that week is scheduled. And people will arrive, they'll check in, they'll have a nice meal. We'll do a sound bath, usually at the location where we're going to be doing the actual ceremony. For the last retreat, we worked with the Cora Center and a wonderful facilitator named Claudia Cuentes, who did a beautiful sound bath and also is a trained facilitator and a psychologist. And then the next day is the ceremony day, where people will legally at a service center have a tea that has psilocybin in it, or hot water with psilocybin. That's a pretty sort of chill day. And then the next day is a day of integration. And we do things like nature therapy. Art therapy is a big part of it, because sometimes people don't have words quite yet for what they experienced. There's also some somatic healing we do. We always have something like Qigong available, usually in the morning. And then the afternoon, people often will get together and sort of just kind of talk, very, very unstructured, but warm sort of gathering in the evening to sort of put to words what happened in different ways. And then the next day is a closing ceremony, and people say goodbye. And the sort of, we're at the retreat sense. And then after that, we have the mirror of what we started with. So we'll do integration in the same way. So we'll have 3 to 4 group sessions and 3 to 4 coaching sessions where people integrate together and separately. And then after that, we do either monthly or quarterly meetups over Zoom. And then people also just they already know each other. So they're constantly texting and they have their own relationships forming. So that's what that looks like.
That sounds amazing. I mean, it sounds so well thought out and well structured, and it sounds so safe.
Thanks. I mean, I think it's really important to give this community the absolute best. They've been through so much. And it's also important to say, not everybody's going to have a good experience with psilocybin. It's 5 to 10% have a either neutral or negative experience too. So we really want to make sure that we're catching people and supporting them throughout, and they have, and creating the best scenario for them to have a good experience too. So mm-hmm. This community is so wonderful and vulnerable that they deserve it.
So I was curious just about how much psilocybin folks will take in terms of, is it sort of a mild to moderate experience, or are folks taking like a more intense, heroic dose that's intended for people to have I'm going to grapple with death now?
In terms of dosages, it's pretty much based on what the individual participant and their facilitator decide on together. So if somebody, for example, is they don't want to take a huge dose right away, it's actually very common, right? And so they'll start off at a more mild dose, and then an hour in, they will have already talked to their facilitator about this before taking the dose, but about an hour in, they can decide if they want to have a booster or not. And that'll be something that was agreed to in advance by both parties. And they'll already have purchased it. It'll be waiting for them. And if they don't want it, it's totally great too. And some people don't take it, but then some people will be like, yeah, I'm feeling kind of tingly and happy, but I'm not sort of taking off anywhere. I'm not going anywhere like a trip. So they'll decide they want to do a booster dose. And oftentimes that has a little bit to do with whether they're on other medications as well, which have a blunting effect. And sometimes it's just sort of about body chemistry too. But that's something that's decided on in advance with the facilitator. And there's ways of adapting depending on how you're reacting to a certain dosage.
I'm curious about like the experience that you had, your psilocybin experience that you had during the pandemic that was sort of like a watershed moment for you. It's a little bit difficult to talk about like what happens during a psychedelic experience. You know, if we could all do that, then we would all be Alan Watts or but what was the essence of it that kind of changed the way that you were like engaging in the world? Why was it able to be such an important experience?
Well, it's very personal, and I'm happy to share some of it. I also think like some things you don't share with everybody too. So I will say one of the most traumatic parts of my cancer experience, like going through the treatment, was at one point I had to talk to my parents about what to do if I died, like because it was bad. Like there were some moments that were it was not going well. It was very clear it wasn't going well. And they asked me like what would you like us to do with your body? And I remember that being extremely traumatic, even though I was ready for it. And that stayed with me for years afterwards. So that's personal, right? That was a personal thing that was like deep in my subconscious. So every time I'd go in for a scan, that fear of having to think about that came back. And it wasn't just my trauma, it was theirs too. So it was a sort of like group trauma happening. And when you think about that, it's also pretty terrifying. So what was nice about the experience I had was it allowed me to like to stop being afraid of it, because when you're afraid of something you just don't look at it, you're just like so tight about the thing. And for 6 hours that space opened up, and a lot of things opened up. It wasn't just about this, but that space opened up and I was able to look at it, and it was terrifying. Like actually like looked at my arm and I watched myself decay and die and disintegrate. Like that's what happened. And I didn't like it. I think I probably screamed, but my facilitator was there, and she was like, what do you see? And I said, I'm dying. I'm decaying. I'm dead. And she's like, how does that feel? And I was like, oh. And all of a sudden my body, everything just relaxed. And I was like, oh, it's actually like, it doesn't hurt. It's really peaceful. Wow. And that just stayed. That feeling of like death is not scary. It's actually peaceful. Just, it's still in me. I still benefit from it. And as a cancer survivor, being okay with death, not like I want it to happen tomorrow, but not being afraid of it is huge. And no one could give that to me. I looked. It was amazing. And that's not going to be for everybody. Like, that's not what everybody's dealing with. But for me, it was. So, yeah.
And that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that tender and private experience. When we met, had the conception that like if somebody beat cancer, I mean, like the rest of their life is like it's like a dream, you know, like, oh, I appreciate this sunset. I appreciate this beach. Talking to you has made me realize that it's much, much more complicated than that.
We work with all stages, right? Stage 1 to stage 4. And I think with the stage 4 patients, especially, it's so profound. But also, I've seen a lot of people really connect with nature more in a way that's really healing. Like, luckily, we work with the only service center in Oregon that's based in nature. It's at this beautiful retreat that's like 20, 30 acres. And so people can actually, when it's summer, people can look out and see the trees, and everybody had a really profound like conversation with nature during their experience. So that was lovely. And a lot of it's just like reconnecting to some old wounds that were buried because cancer kind of took the place of being able to deal with it. And that's beautiful too. And Yeah, everybody's got something else, but it's usually something that's deep and very personal, and it's a safe space to look at those things. And the medicine just sort of helps that happen in a way that's somewhat predictable in the sense that it's going to happen within this time period, right? And it's communal, so everybody there is there experiencing it with you. And then Claudia was singing and playing music for 8 hours. It was just really lovely, and I think everyone benefited from all those elements.
How do you work to make sure that psychedelic therapies can be accessible to folks who need it the most?
We have a scholarship fund, and actually we are going to be starting a campaign next week, to raise more money for it too, because it is expensive. Like, and if you were to go on your own to Oregon and have a ceremony experience, it would be a certain amount of money, probably like $2,000 plus the airfare and food and putting you up and stuff. And that alone is just really expensive for most people. Plus, we have all this added stuff around it to kind of contain this in the right way, so that's even more expensive. So we just want to make it super accessible and make sure that anybody who needs a scholarship has one.
If someone listening is a cancer patient or a survivor or a loved one and is curious but hesitant, what would you want them to know about the Survivorship Collective experience?
I want them to know that this is made for you. Like, this is by cancer survivors for cancer survivors, and it's community based. We have a lot of safeguards in place that are made for you. And check out our website. We've got a lot of information, and our next retreats are coming up. There's a rolling application. If you're interested in learning more, we have informational sessions, and there's a contact page, join our newsletter. But yeah, if you want to do this legally and you're interested, reach out to us, check out our website, because this is the right way to do it.
Well, Anne, thank you for sharing, spending your time with me. And just we'll put the information on how to find the Survivorship Collective in the show notes. But just for those folks who would need a little bit more direction, can you just mention how to find Survivorship Collective and information about upcoming retreats and opportunities?
Absolutely. So we are at survivorshipcollective.com, just survivorshipcollective.com. And you can go to our website and apply for the next retreat. It's on a rolling basis, and there's a lot of information there too. So check us out, follow us, go to our newsletter. We have a newsletter that goes out every month, and we just love to have you be a part of the collective. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Esalen. This episode was produced in conjunction with Shira Levine. Our theme song is by Nico Holloman. Until next time, be well.